Chapter 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. Our sincere and honest move will cover over dozens of dishonest ones. Open-hearted gestures of honesty and generosity bring down the guard of even the most suspicious people. Once your selective honesty opens a hole in their armor, you can deceive and manipulate them at will. A timely gift, a Trojan horse, will serve the same purpose. This book is lie, cheat, steal, and manipulate. It's crazy. Selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. Sometime in 1926, a tall, despairingly dressed man paid a visit to Al Capone, the most feared gangster of his time. Speaking with an eloquent continental accent, the man introduced himself as Count Victor Lustig. He promised that if Capone gave him $50,000, he could double it. Capone had more than enough funds to cover the investment, but he wasn't in the habit of entrusting large sums to total strangers. He looked the Count over. Something about the man was different. His classy style, his manner, and so Capone decided to play along. He counted out the bills personally and handed them to Lustig. "Okay, Count," said Capone, "double it in 60 days, like you said." Lustig left with the money, put it in a safe deposit box in Chicago, then headed to New York, where he had several other money-making schemes in progress. The $50,000 remained in the bank box untouched. Lustig made no effort to double it. 2 months later, he returned to Chicago, took the money from the box, and paid Capone another visit. He looked at the gangster's stone-faced bodyguard, smiled apologetically, and said, "Please accept my profound regrets, Mr. Capone. I'm sorry to report that the plan failed, and I failed." Capone slowly stood up. He glowered at Lustig, debating which part of the river to throw him in. But the Count reached into his pocket, withdrew the $50,000, and placed it on the desk. "Here, sir, is your money, to the penny. Again, my sincere apologies. This is the most embarrassing. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I would have loved to have doubled your money for you and for myself. Lord knows I need it. But the plan just didn't materialize." Capone sagged back in his chair, confused. "I know you're a con man, Count," said Capone. "I knew it in the moment you walked in here. I expected either $100,000 or nothing. But this, getting my money back, well, again, my apologies, Mr. Capone," said Lustig. He picked up his hat and began to leave. "My God, you're honest," yelled Capone. "If you're on the spot, here's $5 to help you along." He counted out five $1,000 bills out of the 50,000. The Count seemed stunned, bowed deeply, mumbled his thanks, and left taking the money. The 5,000 was what Lustig had been after all along. Count Victor Lustig, a man who spoke several languages and prided himself on his refinement and culture, was one of the great con artists of modern time. He was known for his audacity, his fearlessness, and most important, his knowledge of human psychology. He could size up a man in minutes, discovering his weaknesses, and he had radar for suckers. Lustig knew that most men build up defenses against crooks and other troublemakers. The con artist's job is to bring those defenses down. One sure way to do this is through an act of apparent sincerity and honesty. Who will distrust a person literally caught in the act of being honest? Lustig used selective honesty many times, but when Capone, he went a step further. No normal con man would have dared such a con. He would have chosen his suckers for their meekness, for that look about them, and that for that look about them says they will take their medicine without complaint. Con Capone and you would spend the rest of your life, whatever remained of it, afraid. But Lustig understood that a man like Capone spends his life mistrusting others. No one around him is honest or generous, and being so much in the company of wolves is exhausting, even depressing. A man like Capone yearns to be the recipient of an honest or generous gesture, to feel that not everyone has an angle or is about to rob him. Lustig's acts of the selective honesty disarmed Capone because it was unexpected. A con artist loves conflicting emotions like these, since the person caught up in them is so easily distracted and deceived. Do not shy away from practicing this law of Capone of the world. With a well-timed gesture of honesty and generosity, you will have the most brutal and cynical beast in the kingdom eating out of your hand. Everything turns gray when I don't have at least one mark on the horizon. Life then seems empty and depressing. I cannot understand honest men. They lead desperate lives full of boredom. Count Victor Lustig. The essence of deception is distraction. Distracting the person you want to deceive gives you the time and space to do something they won't notice. An act of kindness, generosity, or honesty is often the most powerful form of distraction, because it disarms other people's suspicions. In turn, it turns them into children, eagerly lapping up any kind of affectionate gesture. In ancient China, this was called giving before you take. The giving makes it hard for the other person to notice the taking. It is a device with infinite practical uses. Brazenly taking something from someone is dangerous, even for the powerful. The victim will plot revenge. It is also dangerous simply to ask for what you need, no matter how politely, unless the other person sees some gain for themselves. They may come to resent your neediness. Learn to give before you take. It softens the ground, takes a bite out of the future request, or simply creates a distraction. And the giving can take many forms: an actual gift, a generous act, a kind favor, an honest admission, whatever it takes. So they always say, like, nothing is free. And people always say, this is free. It's crazy. Selective honesty is the best employed on your first encounter with someone. We are all creatures of habit. Our first impressions last a long time. A lot to convince them otherwise. This gives you room to maneuver. Jay Gould, like Al Capone, was a man who mistrusted everyone. By the time he was 33, he was already a multimillionaire, mostly through deception and strong-arming. In the late 1860s, Gould invested heavily in the Erie Railroad, then discovered the market had been flooded with a vast amount of phony stock certificates for the company. He stood to lose a fortune and to suffer a lot of embarrassment. In the midst of this crisis, a man named Lord John Gordon offered to help. Gordon, a Scottish lord, had apparently made a small fortune investing in railroads. By hiring some handwriting experts, Gordon was able to prove God that the culprits for the phony stock certificates was actually several top executives with the Erie Railroad itself. Gold was grateful. Gordon then proposed that he and Gold join forces to buy up a controlling interest in Erie. Gold agreed. For a while, the venture appeared to prosper. The two men were not now good friends, and every time Gordon came to Gold asking for money to buy more stock, Gold gave it to him. In 1873, however, Gordon suddenly dumped all of his stock, making a fortune. That's all they do. Making a fortune, but drastically lowering the value of Gold's own holdings. Then disappeared from sight. Upon investigation, Gold found out that Gordon's real name was John Crowningsfield, and that he was the bastard son of a merchant seaman and a London Bay barmaid. There had been many clues before then that Gordon was a con man. There had been many clues before then that Gordon was a con man, but his initial act of honesty and support had so blinded Gall that it took the loss of millions for him to see through the scheme. A single act of honesty is often not enough. What is required is a reputation of honesty built on a series of acts, but these can be quite inconsequential. Once this reputation is established, as with first impressions, it is hard to shake. In ancient China, Duke Wu Chang decided it was time to take over increasingly powerful kingdom of Hu, telling no one of his plan. He married his daughter to Hu's ruler. He then called a council and asked for the ministers. I am considering a military campaign. Which country should we invade? As he had expected, one of the ministers replied, "Who should be invaded?" The Duke seemed angry and said, "Who is a sister state now? Why do you suggest invading her?" He had the minister executed for his impolitical remark. The ruler of Hu heard about this and considered other tokens of Wu's honesty in marriage with his daughter. He took his precautions to defend himself from Chang. A few weeks later, Chang forces swept through Hu and took the country, never to relinquish it. Honesty is one of the best ways to disarm the weary, but is not the only one. A kind of noble, apparently selfless act will serve. Perhaps this book makes me angry. Perhaps the best such act, though, is one of generosity. Few people can resist a gift, even from the most hardened enemy, which is why it is often the perfect way to disarm people. A gift brings out the child in us, instantly lowering our defenses. Although we often view other people's actions in this most cynical light, we rarely see the Machiavellian element of a gift, which quite often hides ulterior motives. A gift is a perfect object in which to hide a deceptive move. That's crazy. Over 3,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks traveled across the sea to recapture the beautiful Helen stolen from them by Paris. This is all they did. This is crazy. Fight and steal and kill. It's ridiculous. And they all died. So, okay. From them, Paris, to destroy Paris. Paris is city Troy. The siege lasted 10 years. Many heroes died, yet neither side had come too close to victory, which was just pointless. One day the prophet Cassius assembled the Greeks. Stop battering away the walls, he told them. You must find some other way, some Troy by force alone. We stratagem. The con Odysseus then came up a giant wooden horse, then offering it to the Neopotamos, son of son of with this idea. His son with this idea. It was thousands to die on the victory so deceitfully, with a choice between manlessness, honor, and a quick victory on a horse, which promptly built. Okay, that's why it don't make sense. Stop battering away at the walls, he told them. You must find some other way, some ruse we cannot take Troy by force. We must find some cunning stratagem. The cunning Greek leader, Odysseus, then came up with the idea of building a giant wooden horse, hiding soldiers inside, then offering it to Trojans as a gift. Neo, son of Achilles, was disgusted with this idea. It was unmanly. Better for thousands to die on the battlefield than to gain victory so deceitfully. But the soldiers faced with a choice between another 10 years of manliness, honor, or death. On the one hand, a quick victory. The other chose the horse, which was promptly built. The trick was successful, and Troy fell. One gift did more for the Greek cause than 10 years of fighting. Selective kindness should also be part of arsenal of deception. For years, the ancient Romans have besieged the city of Phal, always unsuccessful. One day, however, when the Roman general Camillus was encamped outside the city, he suddenly saw a man leading some children toward him. The man was a foul teacher, and the children, it turned out, were the sons and daughters of the noble and wealthy citizens of the town. On the pretense of taking these children out for a walk, he led them straight to the Romans, offering them as hostages in hopes of ingratiating himself with Camillus, the city's enemy. Camillus did not take the children hostage. He stripped the teacher, tied his hands behind his back, gave each child a rod, and let them whip him all the way back to the city. The gesture had immediate effect on Fallon. Had Camillus used the children as hostages, some in the city would have voted to surrender, and even if Fallason had gone on fighting, their resistance would have been half-hearted. Camillus' refusal to take advantage of the situation broke down Fallason's resistance, and they surrendered. The general had calculated correctly, and in any case, he had nothing to lose. He knew that the hostage ploy would not have ended the war, at least not right away. By turning the situation around, he earned his enemies' trust and respect, disarming them. Selective kindness will often break down even the most stubborn foe. Aiming right for the heart, it corrodes the will to fight back. Remember, by playing on people's emotions, calculated acts of kindness can turn a capone into a gullible child. As with an emotional approach, the tactic must be practiced with caution. And people seeing through it, their disappointed feelings of gratitude and warmth will become the most violent hatred and distrust, unless you can make the gesture seem sincere and heartfelt. Do not play with fire. And you're already playing with fire if you're lying. This book's so stupid. Oh, the Trojan horse, your guile, is hidden inside a majestic gift that proves irresistible to your opponent. The walls open Once inside, we wreak havoc. When you have a history of deceit behind you, no amount of honesty, generosity, or kindness will fool people. In fact, it will only call attention to itself. Once people have come to you as deceitful to act honest, all of a sudden it's simply suspicious. In these cases, it is better to play the rule. Count Lustig, pulling the biggest con of his career, was about to sell the Eiffel Tower to an unsuspecting industrialist who believed the government was auctioning it off for scrap metal. The industrialist was prepared to hand over a huge sum of money to Lustig, who had suddenly impersonated a government official. At the last minute, however, the mark was suspicious. Something about Lustig's bothered him. At the meeting in which he was to hand over the money, Lustig sensed his sudden distrust. Leaning over to the industrialist, Lustig explained in a low whisper how low his salary was, how difficult his finances were, and on and on. After a few minutes of this, the industrialist realized that Lustig was asking for a bribe. For the first time, he relaxed. Now he knew he could trust Lustig, since all government officials were dishonest. Lustig had to be real. The man forked over the money. By acting dishonest, Lustig seemed the real McCoy. In this case, selective honesty will have had the opposite effect. As the French diplomat Talleyrand grew older, his reputation as a master liar and deceiver spread. At the Congress of Versailles, he would spin fabulous stories and make impossible remarks to people who knew he had been lying. His dishonesty had no pleasure except to cloak the moment when he really was deceiving them. One day, for example, among friends, Talleyrand said with apparent sincerity, "In business, one ought to show one's hand." No one heard him, could believe their ears. A man who never in his life had shown his cards was telling other people to show theirs. Tactics like this is made impossible to disguise Talleyrand's real deception from his fake one. By embracing his reputation for dishonesty, he preserved his ability to deceive. Nothing in the realm of power is set in stone. Overt deception will sometimes cover your tracks, even make you admired for the honesty of your dishonest. Chapter 12.